Look up. That's what 7 million people in Israel did last night. And what they saw in the sky above them was something no missile defense engineer, no Pentagon strategist, no American general ever wanted the world to see. Not one missile coming down. Hundreds from a single launch. Iran has now deployed cluster missiles in active combat. And if you don't understand what that means yet, you need to, because it doesn't just change this war. It breaks the entire logic that modern missile defense is built on. And once you understand how it works, you'll understand why America's most expensive defense systems are suddenly useless against it. Here's the science. And stay with me because this is where it gets terrifying. A normal missile defense system works like this. Radar detects an incoming missile, tracks its path, calculates the trajectory, and fires an interceptor to destroy it. One threat, one response. The system was engineered for that equation. Billions of dollars spent perfecting it. Decades of testing to get the intercept rate high enough that governments could tell their citizens, "You're protected." Iran just broke that equation in half. A cluster missile launches as a single projectile. Radar detects it. One target. Defense system calculates the intercept. Interceptor fires. And then, at a specific altitude, at the precise moment the defense system is committed, the missile opens. And from that single casing, hundreds of individual warheads release simultaneously, spreading across a wide area and continuing toward the ground. By the time the defense system realizes what's happening, the intercept window is gone. The one interceptor that fired hits the empty casing. The hundreds of submunitions are already falling. And to stop them now, you'd need hundreds of interceptors, launched in the same second, which no system on Earth is designed to do. What you're seeing in the videos right now, the ones that look like fireworks exploding across the Israeli sky, those bright trails spreading outward like an umbrella, that's not one missile being hit. That's one missile becoming hundreds. That's the moment the defense system realizes it's already lost. Iran has essentially invented a way to make a single missile function, like an entire missile barrage. And the world watched it work in real time last night. But here's what makes this even more devastating. And this is the piece that the military briefings are trying to keep quiet. The cluster munition problem doesn't just overwhelm interceptors. It overwhelms the entire defense budget calculation. America's most advanced interceptor missiles cost between $3 million and $9 million each. A single cluster missile from Iran's arsenal costs a fraction of that. To reliably defend against one cluster launch, trying to take out submunitions individually, you'd need to fire dozens of interceptors in the same moment. That's $100 million to $300 million in defense spending to stop a single incoming cluster strike. Iran can launch dozens of these in a night. And remember what we told you last week. America's interceptor stockpiles are already running low. Former Secretary of State Antony Blinken said it publicly. The Pentagon is leaking it privately. The supply is limited, and the production timeline to replace what's being burned takes years. Now add cluster missiles to that equation, and you understand why people inside the Pentagon are not sleeping right now. But the military dimension, as catastrophic as it is, isn't even the biggest story breaking today. Because Iran just hit something that has nothing to do with soldiers, missiles, or military bases. Iran struck a Microsoft data center in the Gulf. Think about what that means for a second. Not an airstrip, not a weapons depot, not a command post. A data center. The physical infrastructure that runs cloud computing, financial systems, corporate networks, AI services, and digital communications for thousands of companies operating across the Middle East. This is Iran telling the world something very specific. The battlefield is no longer just physical. Every piece of American economic infrastructure in the region, every data center, every financial hub, and every digital investment is now a legitimate target. And here's the context that makes that strike feel like a preview rather than a one-off event. Iran is already talking about Phase 2, cyber attacks on American infrastructure, power grids, water systems, financial networks inside the United States itself. Phase 1 is what you've been watching. Missiles, drones, burning oil facilities, canceled flights, a retreating carrier group. Phase 2 hasn't started yet, but the Microsoft data center just told you it's coming. A billionaire just publicly humiliated the President of the United States. Not a political opponent, not a foreign leader, a Gulf businessman, one of the UAE's most prominent developers and investors, a man who has spent his career building the most spectacular real estate, educational, and construction projects across the Gulf, sat down and wrote Donald Trump a letter that is being shared across the Arab world right now. The message was simple and devastating. Who gave you the right? Who gave you the right to bring a war into the most peaceful, prosperous region on earth and burn it to the ground for Israel's benefit? Who gave you the right to destroy what took decades to build? Who gave you the right to turn cities where people walk safely at 4 a.m. into cities where nobody can sleep? When billionaires write letters like that, when the people who have the most invested in stability and the most to lose from conflict start publicly breaking with American policy, it means the calculation has already shifted at the top. The public letter is the visible part. The investment withdrawals are the real part, and those withdrawals are now happening. This is the story that matters more than any single missile strike, more than any individual military development, more than all the dramatic footage of cluster bombs over Tel Aviv. Gulf sovereign wealth funds, which collectively represent trillions of dollars in assets built on decades of oil revenue, are formally reviewing their overseas investments, specifically their commitments to the United States. The $5 trillion in investment that Trump came to the Gulf to secure, the deals he announced with fanfare as evidence of American economic dominance, that pipeline is being reviewed, possibly redirected, possibly withdrawn. Here's why this is the financial equivalent of an extinction-level event for American economic power. The petrodollar system, the arrangement where Gulf states sell oil in U.S. dollars and reinvest those dollars into American assets, is the invisible foundation under everything Americans take for granted economically. It's why the U.S. can borrow at relatively low interest rates despite carrying $33 trillion in debt. It's why the dollar remains the world's reserve currency even though America hasn't balanced its budget in decades. It's why American consumers can buy imported goods at prices that would be impossible if the dollar weren't so globally dominant. Remove Gulf investment from American markets, and you don't just lose some foreign capital, you trigger a cascade. Interest rates on U.S. debt rise because there's less demand for treasury bonds. The dollar weakens. Inflation gets harder to control. The Federal Reserve faces impossible choices between fighting inflation and supporting growth simultaneously. And here's what makes this moment different from every previous strain on the petrodollar system. The Gulf states aren't just unhappy. They have an alternative. China has been building that alternative for 15 years. Alternative payment systems, UN-denominated oil contracts, infrastructure investment relationships that don't come with F-16s and military base requirements attached. The Gulf switching its financial alignment from Washington to Beijing isn't a theoretical possibility anymore. It's a process that has already begun, and this war is accelerating it dramatically. Now let's add the intelligence dimension, because something is happening with China's involvement in this conflict that the American military genuinely cannot explain. Iranian strike accuracy has been remarkable throughout this conflict. Precise hotel rooms in Bahrain where American officials were staying, specific buildings where Mossad personnel operated, the exact location of the Theta-Ad radar system in Jordan. Targets that should have been protected by layers of operational security, classified location data, and intelligence compartmentalization, being hit with precision that suggests someone knows exactly where those assets are. China's satellite constellation, which has expanded dramatically in the last 5 years, now provides real-time imaging capability over the entire Middle East at a resolution and frequency that rivals American intelligence systems. The suggestion being discussed in serious analytical circles is that China's satellite data is providing Iran with targeting intelligence that Iran couldn't generate independently. If true, this changes the entire intelligence architecture of the conflict. America's historic advantage in the Middle East was never just its weapons. It was knowing more than everyone else about where everyone was, what everyone was doing, and what was coming next. That informational dominance, if China has neutralized it through satellite support to Iran, means America is fighting partially blind in addition to running out of interceptors and losing Gulf financial partnerships simultaneously. The military, financial, and intelligence pillars of American power in the region are being struck simultaneously. That is not an accident. That is a strategy, and it is working. Let's be honest about something. 5 days ago, when this latest escalation began, most people thought it would follow the pattern of every previous Middle East flare-up in living memory. Dramatic for a week, intense for 2. Then a ceasefire brokered through back channels, a statement from Washington claiming success, and a slow return to whatever passes for normal in the region. That is not what is happening. What is happening is the systematic dismantling of the architecture that has governed the Middle East for 40 years, not in a chaotic, uncontrolled collapse, but deliberately, methodically, layer by layer, at a pace that keeps the world slightly off balance and unable to mount a coherent response. Military layer, gone. America's missile defense credibility has been shattered publicly. The Theta-Ad radar is destroyed. Cluster missiles have exposed the fundamental vulnerability in the defense intercept model. Interceptor stockpiles are depleting faster than they can be replaced. 25% of early warning capacity in the region is offline. Financial layer, fracturing. The Gulf investment commitments to America are under formal review. The petrodollar recycling system, the financial oxygen that keeps American deficits affordable, is showing its first serious cracks. The billion-dollar commitment pipeline that Trump announced is now in question. Billionaires are writing furious letters. Sovereign wealth managers are having conversations they never expected to have. Intelligence layer, compromised. Targets that should have been secret are being hit with precision. The suggestion of Chinese satellite support for Iranian targeting represents a potential neutralization of America's most durable advantage in the region. Not military hardware superiority, but informational dominance. Digital layer, opening. The Microsoft data center strike is Iran announcing that the next phase targets the economic and technological infrastructure of American power, not just the military infrastructure. 4 layers, all degrading simultaneously, after just 5 days. Now, here's the question that every government, every investor, and every ordinary person with money in the global financial system needs to sit with. What does America actually do from here? The options are genuinely constrained in ways they haven't been in any previous American military engagement. Escalating conventionally means more of what isn't working. More expensive interceptors chasing cheap drones, more bases getting hit, more Gulf relationships fracturing. The math gets worse every day, not better. Escalating to regime change in Iran, Trump's stated goal, requires ground forces in a country of 90 million people with deep military preparation, complex terrain, and decades of experience designing exactly the kind of asymmetric resistance that destroyed American campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran's military planners have been studying those campaigns and building countermeasures since 2003. A ground invasion of Iran would make Iraq look like a practice run. Using nuclear threats as leverage, the Samson option pressure from Israel, risks triggering exactly the Dimona strike Iran has publicly promised, which crosses into territory where no one controls the escalation anymore. De-escalating and withdrawing means accepting the deal Iran has offered from day one. American bases leave, strikes stop. This is politically humiliating. But it is the only option on the table that ends the military and financial bleeding. History is watching which choice gets made, and history already knows how countries choose when their leaders make the political cost of withdrawal feel larger than the human and economic cost of continuation. They continue until continuation becomes impossible. Here's what impossible looks like on the current trajectory. The Gulf investment withdrawal hits American bond markets, raising borrowing costs at the exact moment military spending is spiking. The dollar weakens as petrodollar recycling slows. Inflation, which was finally cooling, reignites from the oil supply shock. The Federal Reserve is trapped. Raise rates to fight inflation and accelerate the economic contraction. Cut rates to support the economy and watch inflation explode. Simultaneously, Iran moves to phase 2, cyber attacks on American infrastructure, power grids, water systems, financial networks. The vulnerabilities are real and documented. American infrastructure cybersecurity has been a known weakness for years. What changes is the motivated, capable actor who decides to exploit them. And through all of it, China and Russia position themselves as the stability partners the region needs after America, signing the energy deals, making the investment commitments, offering the security arrangements that don't come with carrier groups and cluster bombs and Twitter announcements about who the next supreme leader will be. The world that's being built in the wreckage of this conflict doesn't have America at its center. That world was already being built slowly before this war. This war just put it on fast forward. Last night, hundreds of cluster submunitions rained down from a single missile over Israel. This morning, Gulf billionaires are withdrawing investment commitments from America. This afternoon, a Microsoft data center in the Gulf is offline. Tonight, somewhere in Tehran, planners are reviewing Phase 2, in Washington, in the building where the decisions that caused all of this were made. The people responsible are trying to figure out how to explain to the American public that the 4-week war they were promised is now a 7-month war, with no clear exit, no clear victory condition, and a financial cost that is going to land on every single person watching this video in ways that are already unavoidable. They don't have a good answer. History never forgives the people who chose pride over peace when the price was paid by everyone else. Remember that.